Hi there, and welcome to the Y Factor podcast.
Wait, sorry, what are we talking about?
The Y Factor podcast. It's where young elected politicians, or YEPs, share how they're making real changes across Europe.
Alright, I'm in. Let's hear what the future sounds like.
Hi, and welcome to Yeps on the Ground, the podcast that brings you young voices from the heart of Europe. Today we have Máirín McGrath with us, a young elected politician from Ireland. Máirín works with the EA political group here in the European Committee of the Regions.
Hi, how are you, Rosa? And to all the listeners.
It's really nice to meet you, Máirín. And before we dive into our conversation, we would like to start with two quick questions just to get to know you a little bit better. So the first one is, what would you say is your motto in life? And what would you say something that guides you inside and outside of politics?
Okay, so first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm delighted to be here as well. I should have said that earlier. But my motto in life, I think that's a kind of a hard question. And I'm maybe not the most reflective person, but when I was thinking about it, I think growing up, like the values that were instilled to us was like, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And I think that has reflected through my life on a personal level and on a political level, because I think it's important that you stand true to your core values. And I suppose that's the reason that I was elected as well, for the person that I am and the way I suppose carry out my work.
That's a great motto, actually. Yeah, I feel like that's such a good personal driver, professional driver. Who told you that?
I actually think, in fairness, I think it was my dad, but he always says it. So, and other politicians that I have known growing up, that would take principled stances on things, and I think it always kind of stood out to me that, like, if you don't stand for like something, like you can fall for anything. You don't really have a backbone in whatever it is you believe in, and I think that's so important in politics, that no matter what it is that somebody believes in, what they're like fighting for or advocating for, everybody's coming from a different background, a different set of values, and you have to respect that, even if you don't agree. And that's, I suppose, the core of political debate and things like that. So I think that really stands true to me, and like my engagements with other people, be they other YEPs or be they other politicians or a staff, that, like, on a local level, particularly, or national level or European level, that, like, when you're having your conversations, that you've so many different values to this person, but, like, at the end of the day, we're still one to one working together too for the greater good, really.
Yeah, working towards similar things, just from different ways, I'd say. That's really interesting. And definitely super important in, like, the age of social media. You're so vulnerable to disinformation, so that's great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, on a similar idea, when did you first feel European?
That's a harder question, I think, because I suppose, like, when I think about being European, and, like, I suppose first and foremost, like, I see myself as Irish, and I'm really into, like, my Irish culture and tradition. But then, I think particularly in my later years, as you begin to travel and things like that, you understand the value of being European. And in a really, I suppose, cheesy or cheeky way, you say, like, the first time you feel European is when you use the common travel area. And we're able to travel so freely across Europe, which is so important for young people particularly. So that was, like, the first thing that came to mind. But I think as well, when you're kind of involved with the Committee of the Regions and the YEP group, you get to engage with other young elected politicians, and you see then your differences but also your similarities. And I think that was really interesting, because it's probably about 5 years since I first joined with the YEP group and the EA group. So over that time, you get to learn a lot about those European values as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I feel similarly. Like, it's hard when you're from Ireland, because we're so geographically far away that, of course, you feel a little bit disconnected. But then when you start maybe meeting more people, getting more exposed to the EU and things like that. Yeah, okay, interesting. And so when did you become involved with the YEP program?
So I was elected when I was 2019, when I was 21 in 2019. So shortly after that, I got the opportunity to get involved. And again, it was one of those things that you got the invite, you didn't really know what it was, but
Yeah.
it was a cool opportunity. So we signed up, and over time, then you got to learn and understand the value of the F group, but as well the Committee of the Regions and the work that they do on a European level to, I suppose, promote the different unique regions within across Europe and the member states.
Great, good to hear. Super interesting. Why don't we move on to the next section then? So could you tell us a little bit more about your political role at the local level and how it connects with your work at the Committee of the Regions?
Yeah, so actually kind of funny, like I suppose it's an evolving thing, or just the last part of your question first, like how my work relates with the Committee of the Regions, because like I said, at first I didn't really understand what the Committee of the Regions was or the work they do. And I think that goes for a lot of people, and it's, I suppose, when you explain it to somebody, they kind of ask again, well, what is it or what does it do? So it's a really important, I suppose, facet of the European political system, I suppose. But my political role, I suppose, I'm a county councillor first and foremost, and like I said, I was elected when I was 21 back in 2019, and I think that's the lowest level of political representative in Ireland. And I've really enjoyed it. I suppose I'm an independent as well, which means I'm not involved in any political party. So that has its, challenges, but it's opportunities as well. That you get to be involved even in the likes of the European Alliance grouping, so that's really unique, and I'm really lucky to have that. And some of my friends that might be in political parties don't get the same opportunities that I do through the European Alliance grouping, which is something I'm really grateful for. So just going back to your question, I suppose my work is very localized, and I think another thing or motto, I suppose, that I would use is helping people to help themselves. So when I do a lot of my work, it's maybe with community groups who want to access grant funding, or, individuals, older people with disabilities who want to access grant funding. And I see myself, I suppose, as a key role in connecting one person or one group with funding and things like that. So I really enjoy, sitting down with people and groups doing application forms, because I'm helping them to help themselves and their communities even further. So that's one, I suppose, of my favorite things that I do as part of my role.
That's really admirable. Helping people help themselves is you must be such a people person, I suppose. It's a great way to drive.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think you kind of have to be in the role that I'm in. But then sometimes, every day is different. And like I say, every job is different. Some days are really good and some days aren't. Some days you're really ready for people and some days less so. So like I just treat it as much as I can as a normal job. But yeah, I think that would be, when you go back to ask me my motto, maybe that's one of my other mottos as well, because I really, I suppose, get a nice sense of reward from thinking that you've helped somebody to benefit in some small way. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's lovely. And so helpful to the people in your community as well. Like, it's incredible that you both gain so much from that. And that's great to hear. And especially important in rural areas, which is where you obviously work. And that brings us actually on to the next section of our discussion today. So across the EU, the urban-rural divide continues to shape access to essential services, job opportunities, digital connectivity, and infrastructure. So while urban centres often benefit from more rapid development and investment, many rural communities often feel left behind. So as a rural local councillor, what do you believe should be the next key priorities at both the EU and local levels to ensure a stronger rural representation in policy making to empower all communities?
Okay, I suppose what's important, well, from an Irish point of view, is One of the learnings I've had as well as a YEP and involved in the communities regions is how weak the local government structure is in Ireland, and we don't really have any regional government structure that's recognised. I'm a member of the Southern Regional Assembly, but different to other member states, we don't have much recognition for that level of governance, and on a local level, like it's very centralized, a lot of our decision making, and that's really frustrating as a local councillor. So there the frustration, so that needs to be changed, and I think that's an ongoing challenge for local councillors and local politicians. A lot of our work and decisions and power is pushed up the ladder to national government,
Yeah.
and they have enough, their own fish to fry. So
Yeah, they have enough to
like
do.
we yeah, exactly. So like local councillors want to have that power back, and that's why we're elected, and I think that's what really frustrates me when you're in the council chamber and they say, oh well, we can have a discussion something about about housing, about planning, about whatever it might be, and then they'll say, oh well, look, it's a national decision anyway. Like, do you know why are we here? It's very frustrating. But on a European level, I think what's important and maybe somewhat concerning is the next EU multi-annual financial framework is due to come in, I think, in 2028. And there is some talk or speculation about changes in cohesion funding, which has been really, really important for the regions in Ireland, but also particularly rural areas. And I
Yeah.
think it's important, and there'll be an onus on us as local representatives, the regional assemblies, and national government and our MEPs to kind of say, well, Ireland really want to keep our cohesion funding and they don't want that watered down. Because I think that was one of the biggest things that has brought us on as a country. And we have been beneficiaries from Europe for a long time. But protecting the cohesion funds, I think, will be really, really important into the next multi-annual framework, and making sure that that won't be watered down for different priorities that might not necessarily be Irish priorities as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a really topical debate right now, the next MFF and how that's going to impact on cohesion policy, just like you said. And I think it's also really interesting. I'd love to circle back to what you were saying about housing and competences for local authorities. So you're obviously very passionate about housing. You've been quite active on speaking out about housing issues, the rent trap for young professionals, and also the shortage of housing for people with disabilities. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about how you've worked in that area?
Yeah, I suppose like I'm 27. I was going to say 26. I'm 27, and like a lot of young people my age, I suppose it's really difficult to find rent, or young people in
Yeah.
Ireland. It's difficult to find rent properties or affordable rent, and as well, a lot of 27-year-olds are now at the stage, or not necessarily 27, but people in their mid-20s are at the stage where they want to get a mortgage or buy a house or whatever, and that's just a foreign concept in so many ways, unfortunately. So that's really frustrating. And look, I'm sure you know yourself, a lot of people in our generation have immigrated abroad, and I think that's really disappointing because, like, I think a lot of right now, I think there's not really any incentive to work because people are working really hard. They have really good education. They have quite a good job, but the cost of living is just so high that you're failing to make ends meet so many times, and people are still living at home. So, like, I think there's an onus on me as a young politician on a local level to highlight those frustrations because I live it myself,
Yeah.
and there's so many ways where that is impacting because our planning laws are quite strict. And then that has a knock-on effect. Then we don't have the right infrastructure in our small towns and villages for new housing development. And like, it's kind of bizarre when you think that we have a housing crisis that a lot of the things that we do is kind of cart before the horse kind of stuff. If that makes sense. I think it's
No,
maybe
no,
a local
exactly.
term, but you can run before you can walk. And like I think as well, like what frustrated me last week sometime, I think this report came out that Ireland was one of the most highly educated countries in the world, which is obviously a good thing. I think I said like over 60% of 25 to 60-year-olds had a third level degree or higher, which is great. But like I suppose where's the return on that for those people? A lot of people are just really frustrated with um the lack of housing, the lack of possibility or seeing a future in Ireland. And so many of my closest friends are abroad and don't see themselves coming home anytime soon. Um, and I know, like, I was just re-elected this week last year for my second term. And I think prior to that election, I did have to think long and hard about, like, okay, do I want to do this for another 5 years? Because, like, I can see all my friends having a good time in Sydney. I'm like, do I want to dedicate myself? And I think when I decided that I would, it was to highlight these difficulties for people that want to come home, but like they're like, why would I come home? And don't get me wrong, the grass isn't always greener. I know there's high rents abroad, and I know there's lack of accommodation or rented properties. But I think maybe the quality of life and cost of living wouldn't be as high as they are here. So they're the frustrations
Yeah.
from like my point of view. But then also from disabled housing, being able to cater for families who have, really severe needs. Like again, it's helping people to help themselves. Like as a local authority or local authorities in the country, we're dependent on the funding that comes from government to purchase housing that can be adapted or suitable for, families with severe disabilities. And this year, the budget for that was much reduced on previous years, which is really hard and really frustrating because, you know, first of all, the access to accommodation is really hard. Trying to buy those houses is really hard. But also the demand is only getting greater, unfortunately. And it's hard for me to have to be the bearer of bad news to a lot
Yeah.
of the families that come to me looking for this support.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a frustration. And that's why there's an onus to raise it at council meetings that these things, aren't as good as they could be or should be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really admirable. I feel like you're really championing the voices of people who don't necessarily have the platform or the power to speak up for themselves. It seems like speaking up for young people, for families with people with disabilities, looking after people with disabilities, it's really important work. And like what you said as well, I mean, all of our friends are emigrating, and it's hard, but you're sticking around. You're putting in the work to make things better for people. So that's really
We're
amazing.
trying to anyway. We'll see
Yeah.
how successful it is. We're trying to.
Oh, it sounds like you're doing a great job. And also, yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. Like, it brings us back to your focus on rural areas. I feel like the focus, when we speak about the housing crisis in Europe and in Ireland especially, we really focus on the cities, but it's everywhere. It's a holistic problem. It's not just an urban problem. So that's really important work you're doing, definitely. And so just to wrap up our conversation, actually, I'd love to ask you, what kind of long-term changes would you like to see in housing policy, and like how would you advise we move forward so that we can address the needs of people with disabilities, young people, and ensure their access to safe and affordable housing?
Okay, I think like first of all, what's quite interesting from a European context is that for the first time ever there is a European Housing Commissioner. I think since just last December or whatever. So for what it would be worth, I'm not sure yet, but I think it is kind of signifying that there is a challenge across Europe in terms of housing. I'm to be convinced that other countries have as big a problem as Ireland do, because I really think we're at such a critical crisis point at the moment. But look, I do hope that the commissioner will be able to engage with the different, be it governments or whatever, to identify the issues in each country. So hopefully that will come to some fruition, or some good positive outcome and change. But on a local level, I think, like I said at the start, Ireland has such a weak system of local government. We're so dependent on, national government departments, or Éireann, Irish Water, which is the utility for water services and wastewater services, the department for funding, the government for funding. Like, the councils are really, I suppose, handcuffed in so many ways that they can't do even the things that they want to do. And to give the example, like, I'm from Tipperary, and the town that I represent is Care. It's right on, the motorway. It's really good connectivity because it's an hour to a lot of the cities, 2 hours to Dublin, which is really good in the Irish
Yeah, no, that's
context.
great. Yeah.
Good train and bus links as well. But like, there's no affordable housing there. And like, I think as well, since COVID, with the working from home era as well, people have said, okay, I'd actually like to move home. I could do 2 weeks or 2 days a week remotely, and I can travel to work those other days. We really need to stop the over focus on the urban areas and bring it back to rural areas, and deliver affordable housing schemes. But again, this affordable housing, I remember, asking a question to, council management or housing department, and they said, oh, well, we can't, even though there might be need and care, we can't actually progress a plan because we have to focus on the key towns first. Which, it just doesn't really make sense, because build it and they will come. That is the level of urgency that we're at. Like, people will move for housing, and a wonderful town like Care, people will gladly move. And then bring it back to like smaller villages and rural areas. Our development plans are really, strict and unnecessarily so, I think, in this day and age when people are struggling to build. And so I think we really do need to look at like a loosening up of some of our planning laws, because like, I always give this example, but somebody from home, they have a site that they can build on, they have the money to build. They're two really big challenges that they've already overcome, and they're wanting to build. So like, I'm like, good job, well done, you've done it all for yourself. Then they go for planning and they're not entitled, or they're not allowed to get the planning on that site. But it's just, this is somebody who wants to sort their own housing problem in their own way, and has been refused, planning. So that's so frustrating for me, because I'm like, but that's just one other person that we don't have to worry about. Like, if they can do it for themselves, well done, off you go. And then that creates a knock-on effect, because then that person is looking in their local town or village and pushing up the demand even further, when they'd happily have built on the land where they grew up. So those are really big frustrations, and they can be done relatively easily. And we have seen how emergency measures and planning have been changed in recent years, with the Ukraine, beneficiaries of temporary protection as a result of the Ukrainian war, and a lot of the international protection asylum seekers that are coming here as well. We've changed the laws fairly quickly, so it can be done. It's just, I hope that the motivation for it to be done will be done sooner rather than later, because we have waited too long for those important changes.
Yeah, and a crisis is a crisis and needs to be dealt with accordingly, right?
Yeah, for sure. And like, it goes back to like the no incentive to work. People are like, I've worked here all my life, I contribute to the community. Why? What am I doing? And I read an article in the last couple of days, and it was a girl in her early 20s, and she said, like, I've worked since I was 17, but I've little to show for it because everything goes on rent. And like, that's just so disappointing, I think, for young people to hear, because you're told, like, go get a job, educate yourself and life will be good. And like, you do that and it's still really challenging. So I think, we really need to rebalance that kind of maybe social contract, would you call it? Like, to make sure like that there is the incentive that like you get a reward for the taxes that you pay, and people don't see that right now, which is upsetting and frustrating.
Yeah, a bit of safety nets in order, maybe. Yeah, it's super interesting.
For sure.
I hate to cut the conversation short, but we could talk about this all
You're
day.
Fine.
But
yeah, for sure.
Much.
Well, two Irish girls, we surely could.
I know. Too easy. It's too easy. thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing all your insights and all your knowledge and your amazing work that you're doing, and really opening this really important conversation that honestly needs to happen, as we said, sooner rather than later. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to learn more about Máirín's work, you'll find more information in the episode description. And stay tuned for more conversations with inspiring young Europeans. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram for updates. Make sure to catch our next episode to discover who will be joining us as our next host and guest.